All right, all right. Welcome to the Ripped Artiste podcast. That's the name of the podcast. We're not just doing bodybuilding, we're the Ripped Artiste, okay? We're designing our physique into a cinematic artiste way. So, in this podcast, we have some fun topics for you. And I've been talking about the Ripped Artiste thing, and people love it, the Ripped Artiste, because yes, we're building a movie star body, but like, who are we? We're the Ripped Artiste. We work out 3 days a week, right? We build a lean, powerful physique. We fast, right? We build the shoulders. We don't overdevelop certain muscle groups. We're going against bodybuilding. We do it naturally, right? We enjoy big meals of steak, potatoes. We fit in chocolate. We're living the Ripped Artiste lifestyle. So this is the Ripped Artiste podcast. We're going to do some more so going outside of pure fitness, but today we want to go into the weeds of fitness. And so, Gabe, I'll let you kick it off with the very first topic for today.
Yes,
The
sir.
first thing we're going to be covering.
Yes, sir. Love the name, by the way. So I'm excited to dive into these topics we laid out today. So I wanted to start off with something that you recently, or over the couple of years, or recent years, it's testosterone. So a lot of people think they're magically going to build a ton of muscle out of thin air by increasing their T levels. So what is like really going on there? Like, what is the real benefit of increasing our T levels?
Yeah, so a lot of people think that boosting your testosterone 200, 300 points within the natural range will allow you to unlock and gain more muscle. And that's not the real benefit that you will experience. So if you have low testosterone, if you're very low, and I've seen people with 300 testosterone, 280, so on and so forth, that can make things harder. So getting into the normal healthy range is very, very beneficial. But as far as like, if you were to look at genetically, what determines your ability to gain muscle, the biggest link isn't necessarily how high your testosterone is. It's not even how high your free testosterone is. The biggest link is your androgen receptor density and content. So your ability to soak up testosterone, to trigger muscle growth, to trigger protein synthesis is the most important. So you could have someone that has a 500 total, right? That has a higher muscle building potential than someone with an 800 total. They have greater androgen receptor density. Now, the good news is through heavy lifting, you can increase androgen receptor content, density, sensitivity, but it is a genetic variable. So testosterone within the natural range isn't the be all end all for muscle growth. Now, if someone was to go on high amounts of synthetic testosterone at very high doses, that can drive muscle growth. But in the natural range, whether you're 500, 800, it doesn't change muscle growth very much if you're putting in the work, hitting the workouts, so on and so forth. So then that question is, what is the advantage? Because there is research and studies looking at thousands of people, and there is a link to people with higher free testosterone on average have more muscle, like 7 to 10 pounds of more muscle at a lower body fat. So why is it that people that naturally have higher free testosterone tend to have more muscle and are leaner? And that's because when your T levels are higher, one, high T is good for being lean. Okay, so there's benefits to having higher testosterone for fat loss, for leanness. You have more energy. You want to move more, right? You want to push your body harder, so you're more excited to hit the gym, to work out. Like when your testosterone is up, you want to work out, right? As well, like testosterone can help modulate hunger signals. So if your T levels are lower, then you don't get the same. You get higher hits of ghrelin, so you get hungry more easily. So we know that testosterone is good for being lean, and especially if you gain body fat, T levels come down. So there's a strong relationship with fat loss or leanness and testosterone. But also the main thing is like when your T levels are higher, you want to work out. Effort feels good. You want to push your body. So I've seen guys, especially that use Mojo, that were kind of half-assing their workouts, weren't consistent. They go on it and they have more tenacity. They have more drive. They want to push harder. The other driver with increasing testosterone is that, and this is a very powerful one, is it increases male males desire to improve status. So when your T levels are higher, you want to separate from the pack. You want to increase status, whether that is making more money, gaining more muscle, so on, so forth. Like you want to, it makes you want to improve your value. When your T levels are lower, you're more comfortable setting, like you're more comfortable letting people take what's yours, right? So testosterone, especially within the natural range, has a psychological effect. It has a biological effect. It affects your behaviors. So the bigger effect of testosterone isn't like, oh wow, we got our testosterone from 600 to 900, I can gain way more muscle. Because I've had my testosterone in around 600 and even like, around 600 in my 20s and now I'm in the 800s. And can I gain more muscle in the 800s? Not really, no. But is my sex drive higher? Yes. Am I a little more excited to kind of hit the workouts or film some videos? Like I feel that drive, especially when most men kind of sometimes feel a little dip. So that's really the main benefit. And one very, very cool benefit is that testosterone is also linked to mating success. So when your T levels are higher, regardless of looks and income, it improves your ability to get a girlfriend, to get a mate, because it makes you more confident. It makes you more, if things go wrong or you have a setback or failure, higher T allows you to bounce back faster. If you're someone where a little setback hurts you and you hold it in and it makes it harder to take action, then that may be a sign of a lower T. When your T levels are high, you get a setback, you're ready, you're back in the game, right? You're back up. You fall off your horse, you're back up. So there's cool advantages with that. And then what I see really as the biggest struggle with men today is this feeling of overthinking, of hesitation, of not taking action. They're going through life and they have a hard time pulling the trigger, taking action. They always talk themselves out of things. They overthink. And this can actually be influenced by testosterone. When your T levels are higher, especially free testosterone, it's easy to take action. You want to take action. And that's kind of how I felt because I've always, even when my testosterone was 600, which is, average, it's better than average, but it's nothing crazy. My free was always very high. And so it was so easy for me to want to take action. I wanted to take action, but a lot of men today, they can't make a decision, they overthink. And so that's the real driver. So, with Mojo, that's also why I called it Kino Mojo, right? I called it Kino Mojo because it's not about gaining way more muscle, right? It's about unlocking your mojo, getting your drive back, getting your ambition back. Your sex drive is linked to ambition and drive. And so when you're on the mojo, it fuels your behavior. Now, if we're looking at maximizing muscle growth, creatine, right? The creatine and betaine, which is what I really, really like, is more effective at maximizing muscle growth. But for getting that energy, drive, ambition back, boosting your libido, getting leaner, right? Mojo, increasing free T is very, very good. And so a lot of guys that have higher body fat, they think, one of the big unlocks there is let's get your free T up because T levels come down as you have higher body fat. In fact, when you have very, very high body fat, you can literally shut down testosterone production. So getting the T up can help give you that boost. So gaining fat becomes this downward spiral where your T levels drop, your ambition drops, right? And so then it's harder to want to work out. So giving yourself the mojo gives you that nice boost.
So would you say that this would be related, like the low T would be related to the skinny fat physique? Like we see that all the time. Guys, they're not fat, they're not skinny, they're somewhere in between. Is that because of low T levels or something else?
So that can play in, especially with the fact that it's skinny fat, your body composition isn't great and you also are storing extra fat. If you want to think about someone that is, their weight is relatively low, maybe they're 5'10", they're 155, 160 pounds, but they don't have much leanness. That could be a sign their T levels are low and that's part of that fat storage, poor insulin sensitivity, so on and so forth. But really, the real fix for skinny fat is you must get stronger. You must get the stimulus. Eating enough protein is relatively easy, but you must get the stimulus, right? Train, lift heavy, sleep well, right? Fix your nutrition, And then, yes, boosting the testosterone can help avoid that excess fat gain. Because when your T levels are higher, you do not. This is also a phenomenon you see with guys that go on TRT. A lot of times, guys that go on TRT just naturally get leaner. They naturally lose body fat.
And that would also come from more drive, like they want to work out, they want to move more. So it all goes around. So skinny fat guys, if they start working out, their T levels will increase just from lifting and from cleaning up their diets.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly.
All right.
And I mean, what we have seen is we have seen this 40% drop in testosterone over the last 40, 50 years. And that's been a huge issue, right? And so that kind of makes it harder to want to work out, to want to improve your life, to want to level up, to want to go and build up status, right? That can make it harder to also get leaner, right? So testosterone is really just about improving your ambition, energy, boosting your libido. And I mean, if you look at the sheer amount of men today that are becoming are getting weeded out of the sexual marketplace, there's a lot of men that are 18 to 30 that haven't had sex in the last year, right? Now, part of that, you can call it apathy, right? They don't want to put in the work, they're getting lazy, they're complacent, they're giving up, is low T, right? Part of that apathy is low T. If you have truly high free T, you want to take action and you want to figure this out. Let's figure this out. So we're seeing right now more than ever, men are sort of giving up as opposed to figuring it out. That's also why my message about the male peak is 38 has actually been a very, very motivating message for a lot of men, because they're like, okay, maybe if things are going bad right now, it's not a sprint. I have time to figure this out. So when your T is higher, you're not apathetic, you're not complacent. You're like, let's figure this out. Let's solve this.
Awesome. So in terms of cardio, like walking for cardio, why do you tend to gravitate towards walking over any other forms of cardio, like running, bicycling? And what about zone 2 cardio? How does that fit into this?
Yeah, so purely for fat loss, just walking is really, really effective. It's simply about calories burned. And so if you just walk enough, you can get your energy expenditure to a really, really good place where you can lose fat very efficiently. So I like walking because you can kill two birds with one stone. You can walk and you can do a phone call, walk with a friend, right? You can use ChatGPT and just do voice notes and flesh some things out. So you can listen to a podcast. You can listen to this video right now while walking. So walking, you can do multiple things. So I think of walking more as like, get work done, get things done while walking. So it's productive. And walking is so effective at not stimulating hunger, right? So doing cardio, there's more of a hunger response. So walking, I find you don't pull the elastic band. You don't pull the hunger snapback, right? So that's why I like walking. That said, zone 2, which would be, 60, 70% heart rate. So I guess for me, it's like 112 to 132 beats per minute. That's like me walking on an incline at a brisk pace as opposed to on flat ground. That is better for improving mood. That can be really, really good at supporting mood. If you have any little mood dips or depression, walking can put you into an amazing mood, and it has different benefits for longevity, for health. So there's a benefit to doing real zone 2 work, right? And you can get a good benefit just from 30 minutes. Like if you just do 30 minutes, plus you're getting in plenty of steps, then that's good. And I would count like 30 minutes of zone 2 as like 3,000 steps. It's really probably more, but if you just wanted to be as locked in as possible, just trade 30-40 minutes of zone 2 for 3,000 4,000 steps. But I think if the goal is maximum longevity and health and improving your mood, then there's a benefit to doing real zone 2. That might be walking at a 3 miles per hour at a 6 to anywhere from like a 5 to 10 incline, right? You can play around with the incline. But that's great. So there's a real benefit to doing zone 2, but do you need to do zone 2 to get lean? Nope. Just walking is good. Now, as we go into winter and it gets colder, it might make sense to do more steps on the treadmill and then go and do 40 minutes a day incline walk, like
Yeah.
4 days a week. That's just a replacement for doing an hour of brisk walking outside.
Yeah, I love walking, and also using walking like if you're cutting in terms of lowering calories, I would always first increase the steps a bit if they're not already too high before lowering the calories. Like I find that tends to work better instead of lowering the calories.
Yeah, once you're in, like, it's hard to lower calories. Like if you're someone that's on 2,200 calories a day or 2,100, you don't really want to have to go down to 1,900. So it's always better to move a little bit more. Now there's a point where it makes sense to lower calories, right? If you're eating a lot, right? You're like, okay, well, if you're cutting on 2,600, yeah, maybe you can lower calories, but at a certain point it becomes a losing proposition. And then the real issue with fat loss, and that people don't really talk about enough, is that most times people think they need to lower calories, but they really just need to improve dietary adherence.
Yeah.
Hey, I'm not losing weight on 2,000 calories. Well, and there's someone that's saying this is like 185 pounds. No, you will lose weight at 2,000 calories. That's actually kind of low. You're just not consistent at it.
Hmm.
So, like, I would say 9 times out of 10, if someone truly actually has their calorie intake set correctly, it's very rare they really need to reduce that.
Yeah. So
Now,
that's kind of the fat loss plateau a lot of people speak about. Like, is that because of metabolism slowing down, or is it something else? Like, is it the tracking, water retention?
yeah, so I mean, if you set calories based on your current weight, like if you're someone that's 220 and you look at how many calories you're burning at 220 while moving around, and then you lose 25, 30 pounds, of course, you're not going to burn as much when you weigh less. So then you have to adjust your calories. But I kind of set the calories based on your target weight. And so if your calories are set based on the target weight, then you're naturally in a bigger deficit when you begin, when you have more fat to lose. And as you get closer to your goal, the deficit will dampen a little bit, but there's never a point where you'll stop losing weight. So for example, if your target weight is say 180, you times that by 13, there's never a point, if you're eating whatever that is, 2,300 calories, if 180 is a lean weight for you. If 180 is a truly lean weight, which means you have a high muscle at 180, then there's never a point where you're not going to be losing weight unless you're completely bedridden, right? So, or you're messing up your calories, you're not tracking. So I kind of just set calories direct to the goal. But if you're 220 and you're cutting on 2,800 calories, you lose weight, then yeah, eventually you'll have to lower that. But I think you can handle bigger deficits when you have more fat to lose. So I prefer my style. But yeah, most people that think they have to lower their calories actually just have to improve adherence most of the time. If their calories are somewhere around 12 to 13 per pound of goal body weight. If you're in that ballpark, you should be losing fat, no problem. But then again, as we talked about before, one day of overeating can mess that up.
So the metabolism is relatively fixed. It's not changing along the way the longer you've been in a deficit.
Yeah, and if you can speak up a little bit. For some reason, you're coming in quiet on my end. I don't know what it's
It
like with
is.
the podcast. Yeah, that's better.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Better
So
now.
yeah, so yes, the metabolism is relatively fixed based on how much muscle mass you have and how much you move. It's very, very fixed based on those two variables. That accounts for most of your metabolic function. Now, if you eat a ton of calories, part of the calories you eat is burned through digestion, like 10%. So, but that's like similar for everyone. Protein's a little bit higher, but most of the calories, your metabolism is basically highly fixed based on how much muscle mass you have and how much you move. Now you can have little variance, right? But it's not very, very strong. If you have someone that has a ton, that weighs 220, has a lot of muscle and is active, he's going to burn a lot. And if you have someone that has low muscle, maybe is 150 pounds, low muscle, and doesn't move that much, so it's really based on muscle mass and activity level, right? So the idea that your metabolism is crashing or your metabolism is adapting, it's really just you're moving less or you're losing muscle. You're moving less or you're losing muscle. And moving less doesn't mean just you're not working out as much. It could just mean that your energy is lower, and so it's less of that non-exercise activity thermogenesis. So You know, one of the real powerful fat loss switches is how much you move when you're not working out. That's your NEAT. And NEAT explains why some people have fast metabolisms and some people have slow metabolisms. People that have fast metabolisms tend to just move more when they're not working out. They're more active. They jump around, you know, they move around. So they kind of want to burn energy, right? And then people that have slower metabolisms, they kind of are, they don't move as much. So the NEAT's very powerful, but that plays into your, how much you're moving. So it's how much muscle mass you have, how much you're moving. That really, really dictates your metabolism. And it's not like there's your metabolism slows down at 40, right? The research doesn't show that. It slows down if you lose muscle or your activity levels drop. Now, later in life, right, around 70, you do see a metabolic drop. You see a bigger metabolic drop that isn't explained purely by less muscle or less activity. There's a natural metabolic drop that happens as you enter into becoming 70 plus, but that drop also coincides with a lower appetite. And that's also why, like, you know, you tend to, you know, if you see people that are 70, they don't eat as much. So it's not like, oh, you're going to just gain tons of fat at 70. It's like, well, no, that coincides with a lower appetite. So yes, the metabolism's highly, highly fixed. And this is what all the research shows. And a lot of people that are talking about, oh, you're damaging your metabolism, metabolic slowdown, it's completely overblown.
So what about measuring that body fat loss? Like, do you rely more on DEXA scans, in-body scans, or is it more about the photos and how you look in the mirror?
Yeah, so you know, this is crazy. An extremely accurate way to measure your body fat is to take a photo showing your full body, right? Legs, torso, front photo, one relaxed, one flexed, and post that into ChatGPT and say, being as unforgiving as possible, where would you estimate my body fat to be, right? That's the prompt. And you must show your legs because people have different fat storage patterns. And that is as accurate as I've seen. It is good. I've used it with clients. I've used it with myself. It is pretty bang on. And it also is good because it captures what you truly look like, right? What do you truly look like? And ChatGPT can look at your ab definition, the leanness throughout your legs, vascularity, certain muscles change based on body fat. They become firmer, harder, more pronounced. Your shoulders look different at 7% body fat than 11% body fat. Your muscles really pop as you get leaner. So ChatGPT can measure that. Even your belly button changes when you get leaner. And so I found ChatGPT to, like, I don't even do DEXA scans anymore because I'm like, ChatGPT is pretty damn good. But you must have the exact same lighting conditions. You must have the exact same, like, you must flex the same way, the same pump if you worked out before. So you have to keep the conditions completely consistent.
So you don't have to provide any measurements as well, like waist measurement.
Just your height, your weight, and here are the photos. That's all you need. So yeah, so I would also say, like, hey, these are the photos and height, weight, so on and so forth. And yeah, DEXA is pretty accurate. Some people say it's not accurate. I find it to be, at least the ones I've done have been like highly accurate, even comparing test to test to test, myself, different people. And here's a funny story, right? I had someone that was working on my business for quite a few years. And a lot of people, and Gabe, you've seen this with clients, a lot of people want to follow my system, but deep down they believe, like, I must get better results if I train 5 days a week. I must get better results if I do what all these bodybuilders are doing. And so I had someone that worked with me, right, that was shooting my videos. And I was telling them, run my system. And they wanted to go and do the extreme version first. So they hired a really high-level bodybuilding coach. And they did 5 workouts a week. They went and they wanted to focus on gaining muscle. They went on a higher calorie diet. They ate 5-6 meals a day, so on and so forth. And they ran this like 6-month plan, okay? And so in this 6-month plan, they gained 20 pounds. They gained 20 pounds of weight, 20 pounds of weight, right? Now, they were like, this is going crazy. We did the DEXA scan. And what did the DEXA scan show? About 7.5 pounds was muscle. 7.5 pounds of muscle. Now, here's the crazy thing. If you didn't even work out and you just gained 20 pounds from eating more, you probably would gain some lean muscle too, you know? You probably would end up gaining some of that would be lean mass. So he put in all this work, ate 5, 6 meals a day, 5 workouts a week to gain 20 pounds, and 7 was muscle, 7.5. That's horrible. That's horrible. And that was because he's training way too much as a natural, way too much volume, way too much fatigue. So his ability to actually gain real strength and muscle is reduced. And he's eating more calories than his body needs. So he's just driving fat gain, which we know. And so had he done my approach, and eventually he did my approach, he got leaner, stronger, harder, shoulders, upper chest, arms popped, right? So it's just strength. As you gain strength in the 5 to 10 rep range, you gain muscle. You do not need to eat massive surpluses. Extra calories do not drive muscle growth. They largely drive fat gain. Unless if you gain tons of weight, it's natural you'll add some muscle. Like if you look at a sumo wrestler that weighs 500 pounds, obviously they're going to have quite a bit of muscle under all that fat, but it doesn't drive real muscle growth when you control for body fat, when you cut the fat off. It just drives extra fat gain.
Yeah, that kind of ties into the next topic, and that's about bulking. Like, do you think bulking is necessary to gain muscle mass, and does it change more the advanced you get?
Yeah, bulking was kind of like an excuse for most guys to eat more food without feeling guilty. I want to eat more food, so I'm going to remove the guilt of eating too much and just being like, I'm bulking, right? So bulking and cutting cycles have been largely disproven. There's really no benefit to bulking. In fact, there's a net negative. If you let your body fat get too high, right, then you have to spend more time cutting, right? And so if you're spending months cutting, it's not as optimal for muscle growth. Eating at maintenance is great, but when you're cutting for long periods of time, it's harder to build strength, for sure. Secondly, when you drive excess fat gain, your body doesn't function as well. Your testosterone levels go down, insulin sensitivity is reduced, your ability to direct calories into muscle tissue is compromised. And so a bunch of net negative things happen, especially as you go up to 16, 17, 20% body fat. And then it also makes it harder. Like, I've done this. I've done the bulking thing even when I was 18, and I put on a lot of weight, and it was so much harder for me to eat normally again. I almost raised my set point of calories. I naturally wanted to eat more. So it became almost so much harder to get back to being lean. So it kind of like, if you're spending months overeating, it makes you build momentum overeating, and that you get used to that. Just like if someone has been overweight for many, many years, they're used to that. It's harder to go and bring themselves back to being lean. So it actually works against you in so many ways. You should not be overeating. You should not be bulking. Now, if you just want to play it, if you just want to have some extra wiggle room and you want to just play it safe, and it's hard to nail maintenance exactly, and you want to just play it safe where you always make sure you're eating enough, then yeah, you can go and eat a couple hundred calories above maintenance. So if your maintenance is 2,600, eat up to 2,800, right? And do that, and that's fine. And even if you do that for 6 months, you'll maybe gain like 6 pounds of fat, right? Maybe gain 6 pounds of fat. So it's not a big deal. But yeah, I've never really just eat enough, eat around maintenance, and you will build muscle and you will grow. Now, if you're 160 and now you've been eating, getting stronger, eating enough, eating around maintenance, and now you're 170, then your body will need a little bit more energy to grow. So you might have to bump your calories up a couple hundred.
Yeah. I think the energy it takes to build muscle is not as much as we think. Like, I think it's about 18 calories to synthesize 1 gram of functional contractile protein. And that comes down to like 2,500 calories to build 1 pound of muscle. So in a month, if a beginner could build 2 pounds of muscle, that would be 5,000 calories. That's like 80 extra calories a day or something. So
Yeah,
it's not a lot.
I think that's actually the real number. I honestly do. Because, even when I've done like 200 calorie surpluses, I've noticed fat gain, right? So I think 80 is probably the real number. But there's nothing wrong with doing a 200 calorie surplus. There's nothing wrong with doing a 200 calorie surplus. It's not
Yeah,
a big
I
deal.
think that works in the beginning when you can build muscle faster at a faster rate, but more advanced you get, your ability to build muscle becomes less and less. So it makes sense that you consume less calories to build because you're building less and less muscle.
That's why I love having you on these calls, Gabe. It's a very, very good point, Yeah, for me, if I do a 200 calorie surplus, I'm pretty much just getting fatter. That said, let's say I cut down to 174 and I'm really freaking lean at 174. I know for a fact it's harder for me to have high strength, like maximum strength and maximum lean body mass when I try and keep my weight that low and my body fat's low. If I go from 174 to 180 in a short period of time, it's not 6 pounds of fat. It's a mix of fat and muscle. So, me at 174 and 180, it's probably half fat, half muscle, that change. So like if I wanted to get down to a very, very low body fat, I have to sacrifice muscle. Now, why is that? It's because I can hold more muscle through all my years of training, all my decades of training. It's easier for me to hold more strength and muscle at 180 as it is at 170. So if I want to be hyper lean at 172, 173, I have to sacrifice some muscle. And if I want to be as strong and powerful as possible, then I have to accept a little bit of fat gain. Now, this is very true if you're talking about single digit body fat, right? If you're talking about single digit body fat, this is true. If you're talking about someone that's at 12%, it doesn't make as big of a difference. So that like for me, probably where am I going to be the most all around powerful? It's probably going to be around 180, 182. Where am I going to look? What I think is probably the sharpest, it's probably like 177, 178. And where am I going to freaking pop like crazy and look insane just in photos, but my strength will not be as powerful? Probably 173, 174, 175. So it's like if I want to just be strong, powerful, look good, 180, 182. If I wanted to just have that cinematic sharp look, 177, and then if I wanted to be like crazy lean, 173. But so that's just a function of like, yes, if you're at 7% body fat, it's harder to maximize strength and hold as much muscle. Body fat is a if you control for body fat, it's a limit. Being natural is a limit, right? Having a single digit body fat is a limit. So there's lots of guys that are like, we know that sort of this whole idea of like having ectomorph, endomorph, mesomorph is largely like a myth, right? It's very rare you have someone that's pure endomorph, pure ectomorph, right? And it's also sort of a myth that like sometimes you see these guys that are natural and they're at a heavy weight and they look pretty good at heavy weight. And you think, well, yeah, if they just lost 15 pounds, they'd be ripped. It never works out like that. Some of these guys that are like, that look like they're 15% body fat, right? And you think, well, on paper, if they have, 14 pounds of fat to lose to be 8% body fat, they just cut 14 pounds and they're 8% body fat. Never, no. It is getting to holding maximum muscle at 8% body fat is hard, So even for me right now, like if I'm 178, 179 right now, yeah, if I got up to 195, I could hold a little bit more muscle at 195 as I could at 180, but it would come with additional fat gain, and I wouldn't be improving my relative strength. So almost like relative strength is kind of like the North Star. How much can you lift relative to your body weight? Because there's a point when you get too lean and your weight goes too low where you actually lose relative strength. There's a point when you gain too much weight and your relative strength goes down, right? So that's sort of like the North Star because it finds your peak performance pound for pound. Where's your peak performance pound for pound? For me, it's probably closer to, it's probably in that around 180 or just a touch below 180.
Yeah. And I also think like if you gain too much body fat, like a lot of that strength you're gaining is just you creating more leverage. So you're moving more weight because you have better leverages. So I think the misconception about like dirty bulking, gaining all that weight, yes, you're getting stronger, but that's not from increasing your muscle mass. Your leverages have just improved.
1000%. And like you really do notice this with some lifts, like the bench press, standing overhead press, some of these lifts, you really, and this is sort of, and this, this is sort of one of the advantages of having weighted chin-ups and weighted or pull-ups in my program is that weighted chin-ups, they don't lie to you. If you're gaining fat, your performance drops. So if you're overeating and gaining fat, then weighted chin-ups will tell you that. So there's something very, very powerful with doing that. And for me, I've done lat pull downs, I've done these other machine versions, and I never feel my back, my lats the next day compared to like real weighted chin-ups. Real weighted chin-ups just is almost too powerful. Once you do weighted chin-ups for a few years, you don't like it's almost too much. So there's some power of doing weighted chin-ups.
Yeah.
It's more intense, it's more kind of exhausting, but I just built tremendous power and back width with weighted chin-ups where I could just do 2 sets of weighted chin-ups a week and my back would grow, my lats would grow because I was getting stronger. And I never, and I've played around with the lat pull down and I like doing that for my elbows and stuff now, but I never felt the same stimulus from that. One reason could be, one, like if you're really, really strong with your body weight, lat pull down gets hard to like get into position, get your knees in, right? And then like it's pulling you up. So like if you're a heavier guy with extra fat, it's easier to do it. But if you're lifting more than your own body weight, it kind of gets a slightly awkward. And then also like it's a open chain. My hands are moving through space, right? I believe, and I've seen this, it's easier to activate muscle when it's a closed chain. The bar is here. Now my body has to come up and down. There's greater muscle activation doing that. And so that can also be a reason why doing like a dumbbell or barbell bench press doesn't have any additional benefit to doing a machine press or incline hammer press, but there is potentially a benefit of doing a weighted chin up versus a lat pull down, because the weighted chin up you get that closed nature. Now this isn't something where I can just say confidently with research this is true or false. This is something where you can test it. You can play around with this. You can run the experiment of doing the weighted chin-ups or doing the lat pull down. But
yeah, I think we see this all the time. Like people that have background in body weight training, and when they go do the weights, they tend to do well.
Yeah, they really tend to have this to do very, very well. So if nothing else with weighted chin-ups, it tells you if you're truly improving your body composition. If you're getting better at weighted chin-ups, you're improving your body composition. If your performance in weighted chin-ups is going down, you're probably getting fatter.
Or you're gaining some leg size. Could be that.
Yeah, you could be gaining a lot of leg size as well. But we like to keep the legs pretty balanced.
So if you're running our system, you're improving your body composition if you're improving on these lifts, the chin-ups and the weighted dips.
Okay. So I guess what's the next topic you have here?
Yeah, it kind of ties into this one. It's the ideal weight for aesthetics.
Yeah. So we have research on this, very, very clear. For men, the most attractive weight, which you're going to use body mass index because it's a measurement relative to your height. So if someone's 6'4", their weight's going to be different than someone that's 5'9", right? So the BMI is just basically a calculation based on height and weight. The BMI that's most attractive for men is somewhere around a 24 to 26. So where you'll get the most recognition usually from men and women is more the 26 because you're a bit bigger. And then, 24, 25, women probably have maybe a greater preference to. So basically for someone that's my height, which is 5'10", that's like 170 to 180. Now, someone that's taller, I think, Gabe, you're 6'1", is that right?
Yeah, about that. Yeah.
6'1", that's probably 190 to 200, right? Yeah. So you can Google this, your BMI, you put in your height and weight, and then you can play around with it. But so basically, 24 to 26 BMI. So when I hit a 26 BMI, if I let my weight go up to 182, that's a sign I need to cut it. I need to cut it down. I mean, I think just not too long ago, I was at like 183, 184, and I'm like, okay, I'm losing some definition here. And then 25 BMI for me is probably like 174, 175. So that's probably like my 25 is like really, really sharp look. And again, to really do that number, there's lots of guys at 25, 26 BMI that look like shit. This is while being lean and while being strong. So if you can hit a 25 BMI, okay, with ab definition, that's really, really good. If you can hit a 25 BMI with clear abs, that's incredible. If you can hit a 25 BMI with lower ab veins, where at certain lighting you can see some veins poke through your lower abs, that's like that is like peak natural status. So hitting that BMI for your height, right? Hitting that BMI with leanness is amazing. And you know, like, it's still impressive if you're really lean. A 22 BMI is great. And then you want to slowly build yourself up to like a 23, eventually 24. But every guy should try and get to at least a 23 BMI while being lean, a 23. And here's the interesting thing, okay? So Google your BMI, okay? And if you're lean and you're at like a 22 BMI, every pound of muscle you gain improves your attraction up until about a 25, 26 BMI. Now, once you're at a 26, every pound of muscle lowers your attraction. So let's use a 5'10" guy. Okay, if he's 160 pounds at 5'10" lean, every pound of muscle he gains improves his physical attraction and how he looks up until 180. After 180, it doesn't stay there, it goes down. So this is also why going on steroids for most men is like, what's the point here? If I go on steroids and go and gain 15 pounds of muscle, I'm actually lowering my physical attractiveness. Because I'm sort of in that 25, 26 sweet spot. So every pound of muscle lowers me, right? So this is why the BMI is very, very powerful. It shows you that sort of that bell curve, right? As you gain muscle, you improve your physical attraction and power. And then as you gain too much, it actually goes down. And so what gives you respect from men and women? It's actually not that different. So some guys thought like, guys respect being 220 pounds of muscle. No, not really. Like if that was the case, then every single movie star in an action film would be massive, right? It's more like the Henry Cavill, right, kind of look, right? So he's probably at like a 26 BMI. A Chris Evans is probably at a 26 BMI. They're probably around like 6 foot, 6'1", in the 190s, right? So, they're not, you can tell, like when you're lean, you look a lot bigger than you actually are when you're lean. So that's the really interesting thing. Now, what's one easy way to get a little bit more strength and muscle and power? It's using creatine and betaine. And the research on creatine shows over time, over months of using creatine supplementation, you can gain extra 4 or 5 pounds of lean mass. And then betaine has similar results with betaine, which increases protein synthesis, cell hydration. You can also gain another 3-4 pounds of muscle. So if someone trains really, really heavy 3 days a week, they eat enough calories, they go on the creatine betaine, they can help put on that, 7-8 pounds of muscle to improve that physical power and attractiveness. That's sort of that Kino Gains formula, which is like one that I barely promoted, but the amount of people we've gotten on that is just crazy. It's crazy. I like creatine monohydrate and I like creatine HCl. Monohydrate's probably the go-to for most people, but when you're trying to maximize definition and leanness, creatine HCl absorbs more efficiently without creating as much water retention under the skin. Some people don't notice it. I notice it myself. It's more noticeable when you're lean. So I like the HCl version, which is a little bit more expensive. So if you're very price sensitive, just get monohydrate or so. But I like the HCl. Stacking it with betaine is like such a powerful formula.
Yeah. And a big question that often comes up is, should you take creatine while you're cutting or not? And just to answer that question, in my opinion, you should always be taking it, because when you're cutting, you want to maintain your strength, to maintain your muscle. So it makes sense to
Oh my
continue.
God, dude. I've played around with going off creatine on a cut,
Yeah.
and oh my God, it is so unforgiving. Because you're already eating less, your weight's coming down, and then here's what I notice with taking with creatine supplementation. Here's what I notice. I lift heavy in my training, right? Gabe, we lift heavy. We're going in for a heavy set of 6 reps. Heavy, like 6 reps is like very close to failure. If I'm not taking creatine, if I'm off creatine, it feels like work. That set feels like work. It feels like a grind. If I'm on creatine, I'm embracing it. I'm like, yes, heavy set time.
I mean, it makes
So
sense. Like, it's an energy source for your muscles. So if you stop taking it, it's definitely going to affect the heavy lifts.
exactly. So yes, creatine helps replenish the very energy pathway that your body uses for short bursts of power, strength, energy, right? So that's like doing like a 5 to 10 rep, right? That's like doing a short sprint. So creatine replenishes that. So yes, when I'm on creatine, I like to lift heavy. I want to lift heavy. I embrace it. 3 days a week, I'm ready to lift heavy. If I'm really pushing my body 3 days a week and I'm completely off creatine, it's harder and it doesn't feel as good. So that's one of those really. So I actually recommend creatine is regardless of if you want, like, even if you're like, oh, I don't really care about gaining muscle, creatine's probably something good to take because it has so many health benefits. It improves short-term memory, right? It's good for your brain health. It helps with those heavy sets. They become more enjoyable. You can gain a little bit more muscle. And if you're that sensitive about gaining some water weight under the skin and blurring definition, then that's where the creatine HCl comes in with the betaine. So creatine is awesome. Like, and so in earlier in this call, we talked about really the real driver of increasing testosterone. Unless you're very low, it makes effort feel good, right? It supports fat loss, right? It drives up your libido and ambition, right? It makes you want to take action. It removes that hesitation. So improving testosterone naturally is very behavioral. It drives your behaviors in a productive way. And over time, this can support more muscle, a leaner body, greater energy, greater outcomes in life. Whereas creatine and even betaine together directly supports more strength and muscle.
Awesome. I wanted to finish off with a bit of training related. So we recently have been discussing, it's a subtle change to the programs, and it's moving the rear delt work to the shoulder workouts. So you're taking the rear delt work at end of workout A, the chest focused day,
Yeah.
and and
No,
taking a
exactly.
lateral raises and putting that to Monday workout.
Yeah. So to make this extremely simple, most of my 3 day training, you have Monday upper body, Friday upper body, then lower body on Wednesday. Sometimes we do some traps there. So Monday and Friday is upper body. Now, one of these days we're doing more chest work, right? And one of these days we're doing more shoulder press work. So traditionally, when I built my shoulders up, I was doing, on the days I did my shoulder pressing, I would finish off that workout with lateral raises to really hit the medial delt. And on the days I was doing chest presses, I would pair that at the end of my workout, I would do rear delts. And that can be good, functionally. You're doing a lot of chest work. It's nice to balance it out with the rear delts. But most of the research I've seen is shoulder press is actually very, very good at hitting the medial delt. So your medial delt gets hit very, very hard from shoulder pressing if you're shoulder pressing correctly, okay? So what is more effective? To really crush your medial delts really hard one day with shoulder press and then finishing off with lateral raises, or to get 2 pulses of stimulation twice a week. One day, you're really hitting the shoulder presses, and then the other day, you're really hitting the lateral raises. And it seems like what probably is a little bit more effective is actually doing your shoulder presses and pairing that with the rear delts, and then doing your chest work, pairing that with the lateral raises. And that will give you greater results because it will manage fatigue. This is the hypothesis that Gabe and I have. And so this is something I'm playing around with. I've updated some of the workouts inside the KetoBody app with this change. And it's, I've gotten such amazing results with my shoulders doing the shoulder press and lateral raises the same day. So that option definitely works very, very well. This may just be slightly better.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense because you're getting direct work twice a week instead of once a week. So on the chest presses, you're getting some indirect work on your shoulders, and on the Friday workout, you're getting some direct work. So you could...
Yeah, no, you're right. It does make a lot of sense. Now, if you were doing the face pulls on your chest day, face pulls do a good job at hitting the medial delt too.
Mm-hmm.
So that kind of like, if you're going to keep the program identical, then I would go more for the face pulls on the day you do chest as your go-to sort of rear delt movement because it hits the medial delt. But this is a change that I'm playing around with, and it seems to work. It seems to be a slightly better version. And this is also, an area where we'd love to hear your comments and for you guys to test this yourself and see if you get a better result with this. And speaking of like frequency and like what's the optimal frequency to hit a muscle group, right? So, from my experience, I like hitting legs most of the time just once a week. I like hitting legs once a week. I know that if you want to build massive legs, twice a week's probably better. But like, for me, when I hit legs, my legs are so sore. Hitting my legs twice a week, always being sore is kind of annoying because then you're just sore, right? And then if you have to be fight ready and take someone out, but your legs are sore, that's not good, right? And so as well, me training legs hits my appetite. So I naturally want to eat more and gain higher body fat. So I like training legs once a week, but the ideal frequency is really twice a week. 3 days a week is not better than twice a week. Twice a week is the sweet spot. So hitting that medial delt twice a week is good. And if you're doing chest one day and shoulder press the other day, you're getting a little bit of chest work on shoulder presses. You're getting a little bit of chest work. In some of my new routines, focused more on muscle growth. On the days we do shoulder press, we add in a little bit of machine fly for extra chest work to solve that. And then one day, sometimes we'll do some lat pull down on one upper body day. The other upper body day we do rows. But for me, I find like I could train back once a week, and it's not an area where I need to, for me at least, and for a lot of people, I just find the back and legs grow pretty easily if you get strong on the right movements. And the limit is more like focusing more emphasis on shoulders, arms, upper chest. That seems to be more of like a limit, like arms especially, for me and some people. I mean, Gabe, so like I like hitting the biceps twice a week, right?
Mm-hmm. It's like hitting a muscle twice a week. It just makes sense because once the stimulus is gone, you kind of start to atrophy. But like it's not a lot, but like after 3-4 days, the stimulus is probably gone. So you will start to basically lose muscle very slowly. It's not noticeable, but if you're only hitting like a muscle once every twice a week, you're definitely gonna notice it. Like that's why when you go on a vacation and if you can't work out, just doing some push-ups, it's gonna make a big difference instead of doing nothing.
No, yeah, 1000%. Is there anything? And yeah, like once you I've really spent years sort of getting the puzzle piece perfect with the way we craft these workouts. And sometimes I like to go more minimalist and I just hit four movements in a workout, and I don't worry about hitting everything perfectly twice a week. And sometimes I get amazing results doing that because I notice this faster increase in strength. And sometimes I like kind of playing around with some of my like Thor protocol where I'm hitting a little bit more movement. So like there's a minimalist version of what Gabe and I are talking about, and there's more of like a full, complete version of what we're talking about. But like, I would be lying if I said the minimalist is less effective. Sometimes the minimalist works so damn well. Sometimes some of my best gains and strength gains have come from like more minimalist, 4 exercises max, not doing the fifth one, keeping it, and then just hitting the PRs. So there's, and this is something where some people, you can play around with this. Go into my app, do the workout, do the Troy protocol, the Thor, test your gains on that. Then go into more of the warrior, the minimalist routine, and test results on that. And you can play around with these different workouts. If you can do any of these workouts. You can also do it if you're eating at maintenance or recomp. You can do warrior if you're in a recomp or lean bulk mode. But play around with this and see where do you get the greatest gains, because I tend to feel better gains with my more minimalist styles. People, for some reason, some people don't actually believe I do the workouts I create. They think I do more. Surely, Greg, you're doing more. Surely you're going above and beyond. Most of the time, I do less than what I create. I align most of the time with doing my most minimalist routines. And then I'll have phases where I go and I'll do the Troy or the Thor protocol and do extra movements. But I tend to get my strongest and hardest doing my more minimalist. So it's actually the opposite of what people think. Greg, surely you must do more. No, I tend to do less. And sometimes I tend to do even like my 3 workouts a week. Sometimes I'll do it over 8 days. I'll take an extra day. So, and right now, the challenge for me is how do I maintain my physique with working around an injury? Like I kind of blew up my forearm. So basically, I was really tight on time, and I rushed the warm up, lifted pretty heavy, and then my arm was all like bruised, and I had some bigger muscle tears throughout the biceps and forearm. And I've been like, so this forearm's kind of blown up, and so I can't do any pulling on my right arm. I can't do any biceps on my right arm. I can't really go as heavy as I want to. So I'm doing a little bit more machine. Right now I'm figuring out how can I maintain my muscle and my physique as well as possible without, training around this injury and not aggravating it. And I've actually been impressed with how much muscle I've been able to maintain so far, because I've had this injury for, I think, like over a month or something. I don't know. It's been 4 weeks. I've been kind of impressed. And I do rip the EAAs very, very hard, which are anti-catabolic. And I'm working around it, but
it takes way less to maintain muscle than to build it.
Yeah, no, it takes way less. And there's even a benefit, I think we've talked about this before, but like if I go and do bicep curls in my left arm, I'm doing that. I'm going to do that once a week or so. There's a little bit of a crossover effect, a cross education effect to the right arm. And so like if you're injured, that might be it. Now, would I train one trap and not this trap? Probably not. There's some crazy viral guy on Instagram or TikTok that has been spent like months just training one, and he looks fucking nuts. Like one trap's up to here, the other one's like nothing. He looks freaking nuts. So I don't think I'd do it with a trap, but bicep for sure. And if you think about like humans, this phenomenon of going to the gym, lifting weights is a recent phenomenon. For most of evolution, if you had an axe or you had a sword, you became dominant with one arm. So I don't see a massive issue with training one arm for a couple months if you have one arm that's injured. It's not that big of a deal. You will maintain better results, and you'll catch up faster, and it keeps you in the routine. And like for guys that love working out, like I love working out 3 days a week. I don't need to lift weights 5 days, but I love 3 days. Then it's like, it's nice to be able to go in the gym and even just hit one arm. It feels good.
Mm-hmm. Totally. So do we have any bonus topics? I'm out of mine.
I think we hit it hard. I mean, is there anything else on this whole fat loss plan of really what to do? So what should you do if you hit a fat loss plateau? So if your calories are, if you're not in a deficit, if you're no longer in a deficit because you've lost weight and your calories are too high, say you're eating, too many calories, then yeah, you can bring your calories down a little bit. You can make sure you're consistent at hitting 10,000 steps a day. I find 14,000 is like amazing for aggressive fat loss. But if it appears that you're in a deficit, right? Your calories are around 12 to 13 calories per pound of your target lean weight, and you're not losing weight, then usually what's going on is it's an adherence issue. You're overeating, you're not tracking your calories correctly, or a couple days a week or once a week, you're going over. And that's what you want to solve for. And if you cut your calories when you're not actually hitting your calories, then you end up getting more cravings, you get more hungry, then you tend to overeat and binge eat more. So there's a time when cutting calories really, really backfires, right? Sometimes if I have someone that's going too low in calories, where let's say someone's target weight is 170 and they should be around 2,200 calories a day, and they're trying to do 1,800, the reason they're not losing weight is because that's too extreme. They're getting hungry and ravenous, and then they're overeating. Sometimes that causes them their energy levels decline. So sometimes I actually increase calories, and that's what helps people break through a fat loss plateau. Because I've seen a phenomenon with guys that go, and women that go way too low. It's impossible to stick to. They get hungry, they overeat, whether it's a little bit every day or once a week. And so there's been thousands of case studies of people where I've got them to increase calories and they lost weight because they improved adherence, right? If I forced myself to go on 1,700 calories a day, what would happen is I would mess up my diet constantly. And I would eat way more than if I just planned on doing 2,300 or even 2,400. So that's why going too low fails. Now, if you have your calories set correctly and in a deficit and you're screwing up, then you got to get locked in. I mean, I like doing self-hypnosis. There's research and I have a self-hypnosis routine, and we're adding it to the app very, very soon. There's like next week, there's a self-hypnosis, this research that it shows it improves dietary adherence. People that do self-hypnosis, they keep the weight off. They experience twice as much fat loss. Now, why do they experience twice as much fat loss? It's not because hypnosis is magical. It's because they actually have an easier time adhering, getting in their steps, actually sticking to the deficit. So with self-hypnosis, it makes it so much easier to actually follow the plan. Most people aren't following the plan perfectly. It's very, 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 very hard, especially if you're eating different meals, you're cooking foods, right? This is why in research, a lot of times with like low calorie research, they just give people shakes so you can't screw it up. Have these 3-4 shakes a day. That's it, right? So hitting your calories perfectly is very, very hard to do. And even getting a steak and the different weights, and you cook it with oil, and then you add the oil, right? And so there's all these different some steak has a little bit more fat, right? So the more simple you can make your diet, the better. That's why when I'm getting lean, my very first meal, I do Greek yogurt, plain 2% Greek yogurt with collagen protein, fresh fruit, a little snack, all tracked perfectly.
Yeah. But I also think like a mislooked thing about going too low in calories is how it affects your workouts. Because once it starts affecting your workouts, you start losing muscle. And we spoke earlier about the metabolism being relatively fixed. But if you lose muscle, that's definitely going to affect how many calories you're burning just throughout the day.
Yeah, and so the risk of muscle loss is higher when you have less fat to lose. So when you have 20 pounds of fat to lose, you can handle a bigger deficit. But most people try and go the hardest when they have less fat to lose, and that exacerbates it. They get way more hungry, they end up binge eating, they lose muscle.
Definitely. I think this is a good spot to start wrapping it up. We've been for almost a bit over an hour. So if you have anything to add, we could wrap it up right now. All right.
All right, that was awesome, guys. Hope you enjoyed this. Let us know in the comments on your thoughts on what sections resonate with you. And if you want to download the app, you can actually go and download the app. We'll put a link in the description. And if you want to power up your free testosterone with the Mojo Stack, power up muscle growth with Keno Gains Creatine, then I'll put those links in the description. And we will see you guys soon. Take care.